She sat in economy, judged for her camouflage pants and stoic silence. They dismissed her as a military wannabe. But as the plane fell from the sky, the pilot had only one hope, whispering her secret call sign. The first jolt was a violent shudder, a coffee cup rattling tremor that sent a wave of nervous laughter through the cabin of Flight 472. Ava, sitting in seat 10A, didn't flinch. Her focus was on the low, guttural groan of the airframe, a sound that felt less like turbulence and more like a bone-deep complaint. To her trained ears, it wasn't the clean, shearing sound of wind over the fuselage, it was the sound of stress, of metal being asked to endure something beyond its design. She was a 30-year-old woman who looked out of place among the business travelers and vacationing families. She wore well-fitted camouflage cargo pants, tucked into sturdy combat boots, and a plain black tank top that showed the lean, ropey muscle in her arms. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a tight, severe bun, and her face, sharp with high cheekbones, was a mask of calm neutrality. As the plane dropped again, a sickening lurch that stole the breath from lungs and sent a wave of nausea through the cabin, Ava's gaze flickered to the wing outside her window. She watched it flex against the churning gray clouds, a motion that was just a little too elastic, a little too strained. She unbuckled her seatbelt just long enough to lean into the aisle, flagging down a passing flight attendant. The woman, Chloe, had a smile stretched tight across her face, a mask of professional calm that didn't quite reach her wide, fearful eyes. "Excuse me," Ava's voice was low, steady, a stark contrast to the rising anxiety in the cabin. "Is the primary hydraulic pressure fluctuating, or are we just in a bad pocket?" Chloe's smile faltered. She glanced at Ava's pants, then back at her face, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. It was the kind of question that was too specific, too technical. It disrupted the simple narrative of, just a bit of turbulence. "Ma'am, it's just a bit of weather. The captain has it under control. Please, remain seated." She patted Ava's shoulder with a dismissive air and moved on, her steps a little too hurried. The dismissal was a spark in a room full of dry tinder. Across the aisle, a man in a crisp, tailored suit, Mr. Harrison, let out an audible scoff. He was a tech CEO, a man accustomed to being the smartest person in any room, and he radiated an aura of self-importance. "Oh, brilliant," he murmured to his companion, a younger man in a matching suit. "A weekend warrior thinks she can analyze aerodynamics now. Probably got her degree from a video game." His words hung in the air as the plane bucked again, harder this time. A collective gasp echoed through the cabin, followed by the sharp sound of a glass shattering somewhere in the galley. Ava ignored him, her fingers tracing the worn canvas of the messenger bag at her feet. On it, almost invisible against the faded olive fabric, was a small, hand-stitched patch with the letters, G7. She simply refastened her seatbelt, her movements deliberate, economical. From the row behind, a woman's voice, sharp and dripping with condescension, cut through the rising tension. "Young lady, who are you trying to intimidate with that outfit?" It was Mrs. Gable, a woman whose diamonds and perfectly coiffed blonde hair seemed to armor her against the world. "This is a luxury airliner, not a paintball field. Your costume is in terribly poor taste." A murmur of agreement rippled through the nearby seats. The jury of strangers had reached a verdict. Ava, with her military-style clothes and unnerving silence, was a poser. Her calmness wasn't seen as strength, but as an arrogant performance. The way she stared out the window, with a focused, analytical gaze, was interpreted as her playing a role she didn't deserve. A young mother nearby pulled her child closer, shielding him as if Ava's presence itself was a threat. The plane groaned again, a long, metallic scream that vibrated through the floor. The seatbelt sign flashed with renewed urgency. Chloe hurried down the aisle, her professional mask now cracking, revealing the pale face of genuine worry underneath. She stopped at Ava's row, her voice strained. "Ma'am, I need you to stop. You're making people nervous with this act." Ava looked up, her clear blue eyes meeting Chloe's. There was no anger, only a chilling clarity. "I am calm," she said, her voice barely a whisper but cutting through the engine's drone. "It's the plane that's coming apart. The pressure is dropping. You can feel it in your ears. It's a sign of a slow decompression." Chloe stared, speechless. The technical term, spoken with such certainty, paralyzed her. Before she could respond, the plane tilted violently to the left. Overhead bins popped open, spilling bags, laptops, and duty-free liquor bottles that smashed in the aisle. A child, startled from sleep, began to wail, a high, piercing sound of pure terror. The atmosphere in the cabin curdled. Fear, needing an outlet, began to zero in on the woman in row 10. She was the anomaly, the one pretending to be something she wasn't, the one who seemed to be reveling in the chaos. "Do something about her," a man shouted from the back. Mr. Harrison pointed a manicured finger at Ava, his face a mask of outrage. "She's the problem. She's been trying to play the hero since this started. She's enjoying this. Get her under control." Ava didn't respond. She closed her eyes, her hands resting on her messenger bag. The chaos swirled around her. She was the lightning rod for their fear, not because she looked poor, but because they believed she was a fraud. And in their terror, a fraud was worse than an enemy. It was a betrayal. The crisis detonated without warning. A loud bang, like a muffled gunshot, echoed from the rear of the aircraft, followed by the terrifying hiss of escaping air. In the back rows, the yellow, cup-shaped oxygen masks deployed, dangling from the ceiling like grotesque fruit. The sight shattered the last vestiges of composure. Screams erupted, raw and uninhibited. The cabin lights flickered erratically, plunging them into strobing moments of darkness. The cockpit door flew open, and the co-pilot, a young man named Ben, stumbled out. His face was ashen, his uniform soaked with sweat. He gripped the doorframe, his eyes wide with a desperation that chilled everyone to the bone. "Listen to me," he shouted, his voice cracking but carrying over the din. "We've lost our primary navigation. The GPS is out, the inertial system is corrupted. We are flying blind. We need someone, anyone, with flight systems experience. Military, commercial, private pilot training. Please, identify yourself now." A dead silence fell, broken only by the shuddering of the plane and the terrified sobs of the child. For a moment, 200 souls were suspended in a vacuum of disbelief. Then, Chloe, her face streaked with tears, her training forgotten in the face of utter chaos, pointed a trembling finger toward row 10. Chloe choked out. She knew about the pressure drop. She said it was a slow decompression. Every eye swiveled to Ava. It was not a look of hope, but of amplified suspicion. Mr. Harrison, seeing his chance to reassert control, unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, planting himself in the aisle, a wall of expensive fabric and righteous indignation. "You cannot be serious," he boomed, his voice dripping with contempt as he physically blocked Ava's path. "You're going to let someone dressed for a game of airsoft into the cockpit? Look at her. For all we know, she's some kind of unstable fanatic. Do you know the liability you're exposing this airline to? I'll have your job for this." His words acted as a rallying cry. Mrs. Gable chimed in, her voice shrill with panic. "He's right. This is dangerous. She's clearly unstable. She probably caused this." The sentiment caught fire. In the row opposite, two teenagers, Liam and Josh, snickered. Liam raised his phone, its camera lens a cold, unblinking eye. He hit record. "Going live," he narrated in a mocking whisper. "Military wannabe girl is gonna fly the plane. This is gonna be epic. Smash that like button if you think we're gonna crash." Josh laughed, a harsh, cruel sound that was somehow more terrifying than the alarms. The co-pilot looked from Harrison's furious face to Ava's unnervingly calm one. He was young, out of his depth, and the conflict was clear in his eyes, the well-dressed CEO who spoke the language of authority versus the silent woman in camouflage who might be their only hope. "Ma'am," Ben said, his voice pleading. "Do you have any experience?" Ava finally stood, grabbing her messenger bag and slinging it over her shoulder. She looked past the co-pilot, her eyes locking onto Mr. Harrison. Her voice, when she spoke, was devoid of emotion, making it all the more powerful. "Sir," she said, her tone level and cold as ice. "Every word you speak is another 100 feet we might be dropping closer to the ground. Your opinion is not a factor in this equation. Now, please, get out of the way." Harrison froze, his mouth agape. The sheer, unadulterated confidence, the utter lack of fear or deference, stunned him into silence. He was used to people cowering, not commanding. Ava didn't wait for him to move. She stepped around him as if he were a piece of furniture, her worn boots squeaking softly on the floor. As she walked down the aisle toward the cockpit, a ripple of disbelief and fear followed her. The teenagers kept filming, their smirks unwavering. Mrs. Gable clutched her pearls as if to ward off evil. Ava didn't look back. Her stride was steady, her focus absolute. She was a solitary figure walking into the heart of the storm, leaving a cabin full of judgment and terror in her wake. The click of the cockpit door shutting behind her was the loudest sound anyone had ever heard. The inside of the cockpit was a microcosm of chaos. The air was thick with the smell of ozone from fried electronics. Alarms blared in a discordant symphony, a high-pitched stall warning, a repetitive chime for navigation failure, a deep, guttural klaxon for cabin pressure. Red and yellow lights flashed across the panels, painting the pilots' faces in hues of panic. The captain, a veteran named Marcus with silvering hair, was hunched over the controls, his knuckles white as he fought to keep the plane level. Sweat beaded on his forehead and dripped from his chin. He looked up as Ava entered, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and desperation. Ava didn't wait for an invitation. She dropped her bag by the jump seat and stepped forward, her presence immediately commanding the small space. Her camouflage pants and combat boots seemed utterly alien amidst the blinking, high-tech instrumentation. "Ghostwalker 7 requesting co-navigation clearance," she said, her voice barely a whisper but sharp enough to cut through the alarms. The name hit Captain Marcus like a physical blow. He spun in his seat, his face draining of all color. His hands, which had been trembling, went still. He stared at her, at the severe bun, the calm eyes, the determined set of her jaw. "My God," he breathed, his voice cracking. "Ghostwalker 7. That call sign was retired. Scrubbed. We thought you were dead after the Kandahar incident." Ava's eyes remained fixed on the console, her mind already processing the torrent of failing data. "I wasn't," she said, her voice flat. "And there's no time for a reunion, Marcus. Your inertial navigation system and GPS are out of sync. The error is compounding at a rate of half a nautical mile per minute. You're flying blind over the Greenland ice sheet." She leaned forward, her fingers hovering over the secondary controls, her touch light, almost reverent. "The system is lying to you. Your actual altitude is at least 1,000 feet lower than indicated. You're chasing a phantom horizon." A sharp crackle came over the radio. It was a stern, accusatory voice from ground control, a security supervisor. "Flight 472, confirm passenger identity. Our records show call sign Ghostwalker 7 is flagged for insubordination and unauthorized system modifications during Operation Enduring Freedom. Access to all flight systems is permanently revoked. I order you to remove that passenger from the cockpit. Immediately." Marcus froze, his hand hovering over the mic. He was caught between protocol, a direct order from a superior, and the impossible reality in front of him. He looked at the flashing warnings, then at the woman whose legend he'd only heard in hushed whispers in smoke-filled VFW halls. A woman who had supposedly single-handedly landed a crippled transport plane on a highway after its landing gear was blown off. Ben, the co-pilot, made the decision. He stepped forward, his earlier fear replaced by a surge of conviction. "Sir, I'll take full responsibility. I'll put it in the log. I'm signing off on her. Let her work." Marcus nodded slowly, a wave of relief washing over his face. He looked at Ava, his eyes filled with a desperate hope. "It's your station, Ghost Walker," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Take it." Ava didn't hesitate. She slid into the co-pilot's seat, slipping on the headset with a practiced ease that was mesmerizing. Her hands moved over the controls with a speed and precision that felt both alien and deeply familiar. She began to silence the non-critical alarms, her actions bringing a sliver of order to the sensory overload. She ignored the furious voice still squawking on the radio. Outside the window, the storm raged, but inside the cockpit, a new, more powerful force had just taken command. "I'm disabling the primary NAV link," Ava announced, her voice a steady anchor in the storm of alarms. "It's feeding us phantom data. Switching to Turnav." "Turnav?" Ben, the co-pilot, asked, his voice tight with disbelief as he watched her flip open a dusty, forgotten panel below the main console. "That system is 20 years old. It's a museum piece. We only check it during annual maintenance." "It's also self-contained," Ava replied without looking at him, her fingers flying across the panel's archaic buttons. "It compares pulsed radar readings against a raw digital elevation model stored on a hard drive. It can't be spoofed. It doesn't lie. It only tells you one thing, where the ground is." The screen flickered to life, displaying a grainy, green and black topographical map. To the pilots, it was an antique. To Ava, it was the only truth they had. Her hands moved with an intimate knowledge, adjusting dials, inputting coordinates. She wasn't just flying, she was interpreting, her mind building a three-dimensional map from the primitive data, cross-referencing it with the flashes of jagged peaks she could see through the storm clouds. The plane, which had been lurching sickeningly, began to stabilize. The violent shudders softened into a manageable vibration. She was threading them through the storm, finding a path between mountain peaks that didn't officially exist on their corrupted modern maps. Back in the cabin, the shift was palpable. The terrifying drops had ceased. A tense, fragile silence replaced the screams. People exchanged confused, hopeful glances. But the suspicion hadn't vanished. Mr. Harrison sat rigidly in his seat, muttering to his companion, "A lucky guess. That's all it is. A blind squirrel finds a nut." The turning point came from an unexpected corner. An older man, a retired Marine Master Sergeant with a weathered face and a quiet demeanor, had been watching the entire exchange with a trained, critical eye. He, more than anyone, had suspected Ava of being a poser. He'd seen too many kids in camo who couldn't run a mile. He unbuckled his seatbelt and shuffled to her empty seat, 10A. Her messenger bag was still there. He picked up the small, dog-eared notebook that had fallen out. He opened it, expecting a diary or doodles. His eyes widened. He let out a low whistle that turned heads. "What is it?" the young mother in the next row asked, her voice trembling. The old soldier looked up, his face a mixture of awe and disbelief. He shook his head slowly. I thought she was just some kid playing dress-up." He held up the notebook, his hands shaking slightly. The pages were covered in dense, handwritten equations, diagrams, and coordinates. "This isn't a game," he said, his voice rough with emotion and loud enough for the surrounding rows to hear. "These are handwritten fuel consumption curves for AC-130 with asymmetrical engine failure. Emergency descent profiles. My God, this diagram here, it's a calculation for a high-altitude, low-opening jump. These are notes from a SEER school. This is real-world combat aviation." A profound silence fell over that section of the cabin. The words, spoken by a man who clearly knew what he was talking about, shattered their preconceived notions. Liam, the teenager who had been filming, slowly lowered his phone, his smirk gone, replaced by a look of stunned confusion. He quietly stopped the recording. Mrs. Gable stared at the notebook, her face pale, the diamonds on her neck suddenly looking cheap and gaudy. The master sergeant gently placed the notebook back on the seat as if it were a sacred text. He looked toward the cockpit door, his expression transformed from skepticism to profound respect. The jury had reconvened, and this time, their verdict was different. The landing at Reykjavik's Keflavik airport was impossibly smooth. The moment the wheels touched the tarmac, a sound erupted in the cabin that was not a cheer, but a collective, ragged exhalation of breath, followed by sobs of profound relief. Passengers, strangers an hour ago, hugged each other, their faces wet with tears. The silence of the engines was the most beautiful sound they had ever heard. As they deplaned onto the windy, gray tarmac, Ava was among them, her messenger bag slung over her shoulder. She moved with a quiet purpose, her head down, trying to blend into the crowd of survivors. She didn't stop for thanks or apologies. She just walked, another face in a sea of traumatized faces. The airline, already in damage control mode, held a press conference. A slick spokesman stood at a podium, adjusting his tie. Our highly trained crew handled an unprecedented system failure with the utmost professionalism, he announced. We are also grateful to a passenger who provided some assistance in the cabin. A reporter shouted from the crowd, passengers are saying a woman flew the plane. They're calling her a hero. Who was she? The spokesman's smile was tight, practiced. We are respecting the privacy of the individual. She was a good Samaritan, a lucky passenger who stepped up. The situation was always under the control of our certified pilots. But it was too late. The story had already escaped. Liam's video, which he had shamefully deleted, had been recovered by his friend Josh, who, sensing a viral moment, had uploaded it. The clip of Harrison berating Ava, of Mrs. Gable's sneer, of Ava's calm walk to the cockpit, went supernova online. Hashtag Flight 472 Hero and hashtag Ghostwalker7 became trending topics worldwide. Digital sleuths began dissecting the video, enhancing the audio, trying to piece together the identity of the mystery woman. The consequences were swift. Mr. Harrison's company stock took a noticeable dip as the board of directors scrambled to distance themselves from their CEO's appalling lack of judgment. He was filmed by paparazzi dodging questions, his face red with fury and humiliation. Mrs. Gable deactivated her social media after her accounts were flooded with comments calling her a bully and a snob. Her husband's law firm quietly removed her from their About Us page. A young college student from the flight, clutching her phone, spotted Ava heading for the airport exit and ran after her. Hey, wait. You're her. You have to say something. People are calling you a hero. You have to let them thank you. Ava stopped, her back to the girl. She paused for a long moment, watching the snow-capped mountains in the distance. She turned, her blue eyes weary but firm. Names don't matter, she said, her voice soft. And it wasn't about thanks. What matters is that, in the moment, someone did the right thing. That's all. That's enough. She turned and melted into the crowd, leaving the student standing there, phone still raised, having captured not a hero's victory speech, but a quiet, profound lesson in integrity. Weeks later, the world was still captivated by the mystery of the woman from row 10. The story had become a modern legend, a testament to quiet competence in a world of loud opinions. The airline was forced to retract its initial statement and admit a passenger with extraordinary prior experience had been instrumental in the safe landing. A documentary was already in production. The passengers were offered a book deal. The name, Ghostwalker 7, became a symbol for unsung heroes, for the quiet professional who gets the job done while others posture. The President of the United States, during a medal ceremony for civilian heroes, went off script. He looked directly into the camera, his expression serious. We honor those who run toward danger, he said. And on that note, I'd like to say, Ghostwalker, 7, if you're out there watching, a grateful nation still owes you its thanks. We have a medal waiting for you. The clip was replayed for days. But the official records remained sealed, her identity a ghost in the system. The most powerful piece of the story came from the retired Marine Master Sergeant. He posted a simple, unedited video from his phone. It wasn't about the chaos, it was just a steady shot of Ava's notebook, which he had kept, as he turned the pages, explaining what some of the calculations meant. This isn't about being a hero, he narrated, his voice thick with emotion. This is about a lifetime of discipline. This is about showing up prepared, even when no one expects you to. She didn't care what we thought of her. She just did the job. The video resonated far more than the clips of the panic. It racked up millions of views, the comments section filled with people sharing their own stories of being judged, dismissed, and overlooked. Far away, in a small town in the Pacific Northwest, Ava was under the hood of a vintage Ford pickup truck, her hands covered in grease. A small radio on the workbench was playing classic rock, but it cut to a news break. The president's voice filled the dusty garage. She didn't look up. She continued tightening a bolt, her movements steady and precise. The owner of the garage, an old man with a gray beard and a limp, poked his head in. "You hear that, Ava? Talking about that hero pilot again. Sounds a lot like you. You disappear for a week, come back with a story about a bad flight, you ain't fooling me." Ava just nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips as she looked at the complex engine before her. "Yeah," she said, reaching for a wrench. "Sounds like quite a story." He chuckled and went back to the front office. Ava stood there for a moment, the scent of oil and metal filling her senses. It was real. It was tangible. As she leaned back over the engine, a smear of grease on her wrist rubbed away, revealing a small, simple tattoo, a stylized G7. It caught the light for a second, then disappeared under a fresh smudge of oil. The world could have its heroes and its legends. She just had work to do. What do you think makes a true hero? Is it the grand gesture, or the quiet, unseen discipline? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of unsung heroes. Always remember to be respectful in your discussions, every perspective is valuable.